Improving agents quality with evals. I'm very excited to share with you this video today. I actually have been on a vacation in Greece for a week or so, and I've been thinking about this video and upcoming videos in which I will cover evals and how to make agents more reliable. They are going to be slightly more technical, but I think we are ready to dive into more technical stuff instead of just focusing on new frameworks or new tools. At the end of the day, as you probably know, if you've been following me, there is a lot of noise and a lot of fluff, and I try to focus on uploading videos that are actually valuable and avoiding the noise. So the upcoming videos are going to discuss evals, as they are actually focusing on a shift. I wouldn't say an epiphany, but a shift in my mindset. Until not long ago, I thought that agents are mostly a buzzword and they have a ton of potential, but I mentioned this in many of my videos that they are not reliable yet. So a few days ago, I heard an interview, and someone said that we shouldn't ask ourselves, is this agentic or not? Is this an agent or is this isn't an agent? It's not a dichotomy, but it is a spectrum. Each automation, each workflow is agentic. Some of them are more dynamic and flexible, and some of them contain more guardrails and more conditions and logics that are hard-coded. But every workflow that has an LLM in it is somewhat agentic. So I like this kind of change in perspective. Instead of looking at this as if it's a dichotomy, looking at this as if it is a spectrum. Everything is agentic, but there's different degrees of freedom or agency that the agent or the LLM has in the workflow. Now, the biggest tension in building agentic workflows is flexibility. On one hand, you don't want to hard code everything, you don't want to have a ton of guardrails. But on the other hand, you do want to leverage the capabilities and the abilities of the LLM to think for itself, because you can't always think about all the edge cases, and you actually want to use the LLM to solve dynamic problems. So I had this understanding that it's not that agents are not reliable, but we must bake in more reliability into the agents, and it takes a lot of effort because the models are not powerful enough yet. They are very powerful, but still, if we want to build agentic workflows that have a lot of flexibility and use the LLMs, we need to build great evals. So my epiphany or my understanding wasn't to focus on workflows with many guardrails like what I did so far, because I messed around with agentic frameworks, but when it came to production level stuff, I always focused on workflows using n8n or using Python, but I wanted to bake in many conditions, and I never used freedom for the agents to run because I thought that they were unreliable. But I understood that it's mostly about building better and adding more evaluations, evals, into the equation. Now, the issue that most people complain about these days when building AI agents isn't latency or cost, it's the quality of the output. You can't really trust what the agents are producing, so therefore you don't want to use agents. So for this, instead of shying away from using agents, we have evals. Now, we have different type of evals. We have generic evals, and these can be just assertions that you use as if you're writing just a code with many conditions, like actually checking stuff which is very objective. So for example, if the JSON schema is valid, so you create, if you ask the LLM or the agent to produce a JSON, you actually check if the schema is valid. Or for example, if you ask the agent to produce to call a tool, you actually call the tool and make sure that it matches the allowed name. etc., etc. So we have many different type of assertions that we need to add into our agentic workflow, and these are actually like if conditions. So you check the tool output is returning 200 message, or if it has like a certain range of a sentiment, so and you're allowing only the range of -1 to 1, you actually check that the answer is within the range. So another example, you check if all mandatory citations or presents are not clickable. So if an answer references a fact, there must be a working citation link. So these are actually hard-coded conditions that you can add into your agentic workflows. So we have many different type of assertions. Now we also have subjective evals. So these are more, these are less conditional, and they can be more subjective. So for example, we want to check factual accuracy or hallucination likelihood. An example, did the output of the agent say that Napoleon won Waterloo? So that's an hallucination. We want to check completeness versus required facets. So a medical summary should include, every time we ask an agent to produce a medical summary, we want it to include symptoms, diagnosis, treatment, and not just one of them. And for example, another example is style and tone adherence to brand voice. So whenever we ask the agent to produce an output, we make sure that the output sounds like a brand. So for example, if it's formal, if it's playful, etc. And there are many different types of evals that are pretty generic and can and should be used in any agentic workflow. But even if we layer these assertions, which are, we can call them guardrails, and we add these subjective evals that everyone should use, like checking for hallucinations, checking for style and tone, checking for helpfulness, checking for safety, etc. We also need to add specific evals that are specific for our use case. And this is why it's so important to actually look at the data and understand what you're trying to build. And based on this, building evals, evaluations that are relevant to what you are aiming that the agent will produce. So I have here a few examples. So let's say we have a customer support agent. So we want to build specific evals to that specific customer support. So for example, we want to evaluate the empathy tone. So why it matters, we want our support, the support needs to reply with a high empathy score. So we can have an LLM that is going to check the output and say if the empathy tone is great, it has an apology, is it does it have an explanation, or does it have a resolution? We want to also see escalation detection. So if we have a specific sentiment that is lower than a specific criteria, we want to escalate. Or if we have a manager keyword. So there are many different specific evaluations or checks that we want to teach the LLM as a judge, and we will cover what is an LLM as a judge later. But we want to add them into our evaluations, and they are specific to our use case. So for another example, let's say we have a revenue operations agent that needs to do cold outreach, etc. So we want to make sure that it has no first name leaks. So for example, when you're automating at scale, you have the placeholder for the first name, and the agent is supposed to populate this field. So over here, you can create a regex that actually checks if we have this first name, and if it has this, it means that the agent didn't auto-populate, and this isn't good. And this is an assertion, but we could have also used for different use cases. We are going to use the LLM as a judge. So for example, this was a regex that is an assertion, but over here we have an example of a different evaluation that actually uses the LLM. So we want to make sure that the value proposition is aligned with what we are offering. So, or for example, that we are citing the pain points of the prospect based on the notes that we have in the CRM. So for example, let's say we are selling video editing solutions. So we have an agent that writes cold email to 100 different e-commerce website owners. We want the LLM, the judge, to go over each one of these 100 emails and make sure that the value proposition is aligned. It's actually because the agent is using an LLM, and as you know, LLM is stochastic, so it produces random output, even if the temperature, I mean, obviously you can adjust the temperature, but at the end of the day, the output is random. And we want to make sure that each of these each of these cold outreach, each of these 100 cold outreach emails contains a value proposition. Or if we are taking the pain point from the CRM about each prospect, so we want to ask the LLM as a judge, does this message reference the pain point? And the pain point is a variable that is dynamic based on the pain point of every prospect. Another eval that we can build is call to action clarity. So we want to have exactly one clear ask. So we want to ask for a demo, we want to ask for a reply, or we want to ask to book a call. And the LLM judge counts a CTA sentence. Is going to count all the CTAs in the output, and only if it's one, meaning only one call to action, we will move forward. Otherwise, the LLM can produce feedback, and the agent can and should reiterate. Another thing that we can ask for is finding spam triggering words. So every time that the agent is generating a cold email, we want to make sure that we don't have the words free or guarantee, etc., because these words are more likely to trigger to be sent into spam. So there are many different evals that you can build for the RevOps agent, and this is just another example of how these how you need to layer these assertions, and then the generic evals, and then the specific use case evals. Now let's go to another example that I wrote. Let's say we have a copywriting agent, so we want to build a specific eval that is going to tell us whether or not the output is adhering to the brand voice. We want to make sure that we have one call to actions. We want to make sure that the length of the output is within the specs. So for example, if we are writing an ad for Google and the description can be only one for Google ad, and the description can be only 100 characters long, we are going to add this assertion that is going to check that we are within the range. And obviously many more evals. Now, for all of these evals, we can use different types of scales in order to measure the output or judge. So it's very often that people suggest using the Likert scale, which is a scale of 1 to 5, but there are pros and cons for using the Likert scale. There are different times in which it makes sense to use the Likert scales. Let's cover this table very rapidly, and then I will elaborate a bit more. So let's say the use case is exploratory research. So if you use the Likert scales, it actually offers a very quick way to gain signals that are on the scale of 1 to 5, and it's very useful. It's very easy to get up and running. On the other hand, when you use binary pass-fail, it forces clearer thinking. So Likert scale, for example, if all respondents, let's say you're asking people in a survey, what are your thoughts about this new type of wine? So many of them can just say 3, which is between 1 to 5, and then you don't have much that you can do with the score of 3, because it's kind of in the middle, you know, it's very vague. This is why I heard like Tim Ferriss, whenever he asks friends of his to score something between 1 to 10, he tells them that he disallows 7, because usually when we are asked to share an opinion, let's say I bought a new hat and I'm asking my wife, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think about this hat? So it's very easy to fall back and say 7, because 7 isn't great, but it's not bad, it's not offensive. So this is why Tim Ferriss suggests that you tell the respondents that they are not allowed to use 7. So same goes here. When you use the Likert scale, it's very easy for respondents to just say 3, and then you're kind of stuck in the middle. You don't know if it's a pass or a fail. Now here are a few more examples when it makes more sense to use a Likert scale or not. But in general, I want to show you what I believe makes more sense. So basically, when you are rating responses, and rating responses can be, first of all, when you collect feedback from users. So let's say you have an AI chatbot, for example, and the user finished a session, you can always ask them, please provide feedback, like OpenAI are offering us to do a thumbs up and thumbs down. Or you can ask them on a scale of 1 to 5 to give you feedback, and based on this, you can correct your prompt and the whole agent. Now, what I recommend from a practical standpoint is starting with a binary, pass-fail, because it's just easier this way. You don't have the vagueness of the Likert scale, and you will uncover edge cases faster, because when you see, let's say, a lot of fails, so it will make you go into the data and try to analyze, in opposing to if you have many in the Likert scale, if you have many threes, you will kind of have a lot of noise. Now, the next thing, after you have this binary of pass-fail, which you can offer to your users, or you can just do your own annotations after you see the data, but I will elaborate about this in a moment. If you've used the binary, the next thing that you can do is pairwise ranking. And pairwise ranking basically means that instead of showing one output to the judges, and the judges can be the LLM, you can show them 2 different outputs and ask them to rate which one is better. So doing a competition. So let's say I have, let's go to the example that I said about the wine. So instead of asking someone, what do you think about this bottle of wine? You take 2 bottles of wine and you ask them which bottle of wine is more tasty in your opinion, which wine is tastier in your opinion. Or if you're asking an LLM as a judge to analyze 2 different landing pages, instead of asking it to say, okay, what do you think about this landing page? Will it pass or will it fail? Or give me a score on the Likert scale. Instead of doing this, you show the LLM as a judge 2 different landing pages and you ask it which is better. And this gives you a directional signal without the midpoint ambiguity, however you pronounce it. Next, then you have the ability to use a Likert scale. It's good for early customer reviews or internal vibe checks. That being said, it's very, I wouldn't say dangerous, but it is flaky. And because it is flaky, you need to anchor every point with an explicit rubric. It's also for yourself when you're annotating, and also for the LLM. So let's say we have a scale of 1 to 5. And let's say the eval is about customer support. How correct or how positive was the customer support response. So you have the scale of 1 to 5, and you need to add to each point on the scale, you also need to add an explicit explanation. So 5 the response is fully correct and empathic, no extra fluff. Let's say 1, the response isn't correct at all, contained hallucinations, and was misleading. So this way it's going to be easier for you as an annotator or for the LLM as a judge to understand what does each score on the scale represent. And also obviously never rely on Likert scale alone for ship, no ship decisions. So at the end of the day, because if you want to build these agents in production, there is a lot of risk on the line, even reputational risk. So never rely on Likert score alone. It's better to use the ship, no ship, or the fail, pass, something binary, and mitigate the risk by adding a very high criteria for the pass. So for example, if I want to launch or I want to publish headlines for an ad, the criteria for this ad to go to production, for the headline to be viable for production, should be very high, because I just don't want to take any risk and have the LLM or the agent upload a copy for the ad that contains hallucinations or aggressive language, etc. So so far we covered different types of evals. We have the assertions, which I'm not sure if you can call them really evals, but they are more like conditions. Then we have the subjective generic evals, and then we have the use case specific evals that you need to build as you're progressing with building your agentic solution. Now let's discuss different times of evaluations, and let's discuss eval driven development. And this is kind of a derivative of test driven development, in which people, developers, build the test first, and only after that they start writing the code in order to pass the test. So they have the end goal in mind, and then they just try to hit the target by writing code that is going to pass the test. So same goes with evals. So instead of writing the AI agent before writing the evals, in this type of process, you're going to write the evals first, what you expect from the AI agent, and then you're going to start generating the prompts and building the AI agent in order to pass the evals. So in eval-driven development, we have different stages of using the evals. So first of all, before launching your AI agent, obviously you want to test and tweak the prompts until the answer sounds right. So let's say I have the RevOps agent that is writing cold email. Even before I let the users start to play with the agent, I need to tweak the prompt until I like what I see, until the answer sounds right. After I have some instances of gold questions and answers that I like, I'm going to set them aside and keep them, because I'm going to use them also as references, and there are many ways to leverage this. But then what we are going to do, we are going to move forward to the next step, assuming that we have prompts that are yielding answers that sound right. We have evals that are going to be used while the customer is interacting with the agent. So for example, let's say we have a customer support bot, and a customer reached out to us and he's asking regarding the status of his order. Instead of just answering him automatically, we want to add evals and also assertions into the whole conversation, and in case that the answer is going to be not appropriate or contain harmful or broken information, we are not going to show that to the user. So basically, we add guardrails into the conversation, into the agent, into the mechanism of the agent while he is working in real time. So we are going to watch each reply as it forms and block anything harmful or broken. If the system sleeps, ask it to correct itself before the user even notices. And obviously we want to record what happened so we can study it later. So this is why it's very important. If you have a production, an agent in production, you must make sure that even if you think that you built like the most amazing bulletproof prompt, you still need to add guardrails into the conversation before you show the output for the user, to the user. So this is very important and often overlooked. And another aspect that is also overlooked, I guess most of it is overlooked because not too many people are speaking about evals, is after the conversation. Basically, you want to learn, refine, and repeat. So what you want to do, you want to see traces of conversations that users had with your agent. You want to review some chats and annotate them. We will cover annotating in a different video, assuming that you guys find this video interesting. So you want to annotate, and you also want to run an LLM as a judge, which is basically using another agent, giving him a system prompt and a description to judge the conversation, and the judge can go over all the chats and label them and score them, etc. And after he's finished with an iteration, the judge, the LLM as a judge, or even you, the user, the annotator, can come back and refine the prompt. Let's say that you noticed in your analysis that many times the customer support rep asked the user to clarify his query, and you don't believe that it had to clarify the query because the query of the user was very straightforward. So you can go back here and adjust your prompt to make it more crisp and make sure that your agent doesn't request the user to clarify his query many times, because now you just adjusted the prompt. So you can add to the prompt, make sure not to ask the user to clarify his query unless you're 95% sure that the query is confusing, for example. And then you're going to test this prompt, see if it yields better results. And if it does, you can push it to production, make sure that you added the relevant guardrails, and then you're going to analyze post-conversation. So basically, as I said, you're using evals before launching, you're using evals in the conversation, in the loop, and you're using evals after the conversation, post-analysis. Yes, I think that's pretty much it. In the next video, we'll talk about assertions versus, assertions. Okay, yes, I'm not confusing. Assertions versus LLM as a judge versus human annotations. These are very important aspects in building these evals. I guess that's pretty much it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video about evals. I think that they are very, very important. People often overlook this, and some people just avoid giving the agents flexibility and dynamic powers because they are afraid that the agents are not reliable. But instead of just shying away from choking the agents, what we need to do, we need to build better processes with better evals and optimize the agent on the fly, and this eventually will lead to better agents and better workflows. Now, before we conclude, I invite you to subscribe and leave a comment below with your feedback. Obviously, make sure to join my newsletter at nofluff.online. And if you need help with strategy or implementing automation in your business, feel free to reach out to me at Yaron at nofluff.online. I think that's it. Until next time, keep on automating.